Hey everyone, my name is Ed Albanese. My team and I are building Ghostgate, which is an LLM observability product built specifically for IT and security teams. My prior role was as the COO and head of revenue for a company named Victara. I had Victara, if you're not familiar with it, is a large language model powered company. They deliver something called retrieval augmented generation. I know that's a mouthful. And what it means is that it's really the core backbone for how companies are trying to figure out how to chat with your data. If you've ever heard that expression, they need a RAG platform. And so I got a chance to talk to over 500 companies about how they're thinking about adopting a RAG platform as part of that role. And what I learned is that there's incredible enthusiasm within the engineering community. There's a lot of prototyping going on. We had an incredible amount of interest. But as soon as it got near production, security had some real reservations. Security would issue the questionnaires, but these were unlike questionnaires I had seen in the past. My prior role was as a VP at Splunk. I spent a lot of time with CISOs, a lot of questionnaires. There's a real air of uncertainty in the air about LLMs, which is why 75% of companies right now are either actively or have banned ChatGPT, actively considering or have banned ChatGPT. And the reason is the security teams simply don't know if they have a way to understand what's happening and have control. Why not? Well, they've spent years building really impressive infrastructure in the observability space. When I say observability, what I mean is they collect information from applications, traditional stacks like log files, so say a Java stack trace, or metrics like CPU utilization. And they've made real investments in creating thousands of monitors in every company, trying to pay attention to potential issues around data privacy or end user experience. And the truth is that LLMs change the game. The traditional approach is a keyword-based approach, for example. Search for error, search for warning, search for severity. It doesn't work in a prompt or a prompt output response. If you're a CISO or a CIO and you're trying to figure out if you have enough visibility and understanding about whether an LLM-powered product that your engineering team is working on right now is safe to bring into the business, you've basically got four options. One is you can completely trust the engineering team and just hope that if any issues come up, they're going to be on top of it. That's a little bit like asking the fox to guard the hen house. Your second option is you can say, hey, you know what? I know you guys have been buying some really interesting and attractive tools for LLM observability, something like, say, Fiddler or Arise, but you've been doing that specifically so you can understand the performance of your model or to understand how a model evaluation approach might work. That's like giving a hammer and asking your team to dig a hole. Option three is you can ask them to piece it all together. Go to Cloudflare and get an AI gateway. Go download Nemo guardrails from NVIDIA. Set up an Elastic cluster and start collecting every prompt in and out. Go and try to add maybe a closed source tool like Private AI to do stripping of PII. It's a lot, and it's a little bit like having a dike where you see the leaks, and instead of fixing it, you just ask everybody to put a finger in and hope it holds up. The fourth option is to look at a solution that is built purposely for IT and security teams and starts from a different foundational orientation than traditional observability tools do. So that means it is native natural language understanding at the start. It is not a keyword platform, and it's also not a quiet on the side watchman. It has to have some inline control capacities because LLMs are fundamentally different in what they can do. And third, it still needs to work with your existing stack. Infrastructure hasn't gone anywhere. All those databases and applications you're running are still present as well. But what it does need to do, unlike, say, something like Fiddler or Arise, is it needs to focus in on the things that IT and security teams absolutely require. Data access and data access management, including RBAC. Compliance. So compliance is a very fast-moving space in AI. So if you're following anything like, say, the EU AI Act, It could be a couple of months, and all of a sudden, every single thing that your business is generating needs to be identified as generated content. How's IT and security going to handle that? They're not going to use Fiddler to do that. Threat detection. There are different threats that LLMs have introduced, so much so that MITRE, which is a pretty industry standard for understanding threat detection, they've only created one other object, in my knowledge, besides the attack framework and the OT attack framework, which is now the Atlas framework for LLMs. And data privacy, which is really essential and probably the biggest concern right now facing IT and security. It's a big market. And what I mean by big is a lot of people spend on observability at the APM level, at the security level. And so unsurprisingly, there are a lot of logos on this map. But don't mistake anything about the number of logos here. The traditionals I've left off on purpose. They simply can't do the job. And so what you're looking at is a set of tools that have been created, sometimes in the last 3 to 5 years, focused mostly on ML engineers and how they can do their jobs better. To my knowledge, no tool has been built specifically and primarily for IT and security teams to do theirs. So our plan is to focus on organizations with 1,000 or more employees and a dedicated CISO. We plan to have a direct sales orientation, but one that also recognizes that we are a lubricant for allowing LLM-powered products to move to production, and we will partner with LLM providers. And pricing would be, unlike, say, for example, traditional observability, really focused on the problem at hand, what's being monitored, which are LLMs and the tokens that are passing through the network. Would use a tactic like having a free AI gateway with an open logging format made available as an awareness building tool, but really focus on allowing teams to dial in the right duty of care that they have as an organization based on their needs. It's the right team for the job. CC is an expert in AI that spent time at Meta and Microsoft. Harry's built his entire career in AI at both Google, Intel, and Meta. And myself, I've been working with IT and security teams for over 25 years. Before Vectara, I was at Splunk for 4 years, who acquired my last company, Krypton. And I've also spent time selling into IT and building for IT at VMware, Cloudera, and MongoDB. Any questions?
Any questions in the room? Yeah, here we go.
So are you building the log management product or APM, or just apply the large language model to the data the company already has? That's the first question.
First question. So I think what has to happen is it has to be inline. So it's an AI, it starts as an AI gateway. So think API gateway, collects it does observe every prompt so from application to LLM, and it also makes sure that it observes every response. And then it's really built around a set of services organized around that observability stack, focused on each of the end user needs. Now, one of the things that I learned in my time at Cloudera, if you guys are all familiar with Cloudera, it started off as a Hadoop company. I was the first business hire there. It was really just MapReduce and HDFS. And when you're in a new market, like that was the establishment of big data, you need to move fast to put the right pieces in place because people are eager to adopt something, but they need everything they need it wrapped. So a big part of what we would be doing is pulling down services from including some open source technologies that are wrapped and ready to go as a complete offering rather than a bunch of piece parts.
Got it, thank you. Second question, Datadog already came out with the product Bits, right? That's applying the large language model on top of their existing observability product. So I don't see Datadog even on your competitive landscape.
Yeah, they're not a competitor. So Datadog, let me tell you why they're not a competitor. Datadog is, when you add an LLM on top of your stack, you might be doing that for the purposes of what's called AI ops, just helping the people that are receiving a bag of alerts to be able to process those alerts more quickly. If you equally go to the Datadog website and you try to figure out what do they do to monitor OpenAI, they're going to show you, they're going to be able to track how many tokens are passed between the network, and they're going to be able to tell you how much you spent. That's it. They're not worried about security or observability at any meaningful level. And why? Because it's a metrics-based platform with a bolt-on log engine. It is not in any way, shape, or form built for a 20,000 character prompt in or out. That is not what it's built to do. It's not what it's built to query. It's not what it's built to build a dashboard around.
Thank you for this very exciting and very, very relevant to the space. Question, how do you see hallucinations, particularly in the enterprise space, affecting this map? Do you see that as part of this or something that you might want to integrate with in the future? Thanks.
I think there's a number of tactics that have to be applied in order to reduce hallucinations. It does, of course, start with the model itself, and it also includes prompt engineering, but it moves into both the organization's ability to use technologies like retrieval augmented generation to help ground some of the information. And it requires some guardrails, as we would call them, that are running after the LLM has been moved into production and users are issuing dynamic prompts of any kind.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. It's really great. I just have one question, like how are you planning to actually tackle the problem of prompt injection and jailbreaking or things like that? Because okay, in industry it's like SQLi and all those attacks and all, but it is not exactly like that because it's a natural language and you can't just apply simple rules in and out of every single like prompt which is coming in. So, and at the fundamental LLM model level, you can't just fine tune it, or every company can't just fine tune the models to have that kind of security in place. So
yes, I love that question. I mean, one of the things that I learned, people ask me all the time, how did Splunk have so many different customers across so many different industries and so many different applications, and they were somehow able to service them all? It is a pretty interesting question, right? And I think part of it very few people talk about the secret, but a big part of it was the ecosystem and the collaboration that happened between organizations for creating apps and plugins and integrations to help gather the right data from a whole bunch of different sources. And then also equal sharing of potential correlation queries of high value to find and look over that information so that there is a pretty generously sharing community of people looking to protect against bad actors. And so there's no question, while we didn't put it up there, that our vision includes building upon some of the right foundations that were established by prior vendors, but doing it in a way that is native natural language understanding at its core and moves beyond the previous architecture that was built for traditional software 2.0. Absolutely. Yeah, it's an outstanding question. If anybody didn't hear it, because it was a little quiet over here, she was asking, once you've fine-tuned a model with enterprise data, you've put yourself in some sort of data access risk potentially. And organizations are probably thinking somewhat thoughtfully about who they give access to that model to based on data access. But in the previous solution slide, you'll note that data access is one of the most important areas in our mind. It is something that has to account for not only the fact that it has to recognize identity in a way that observability platforms don't normally do, and to be in a position to help with inline controls. Now, it wouldn't be something we would do in a V1 instance, so we didn't talk a lot about it, but we do believe that it's one of the most exciting areas is data access and data access control. I'll tell a quick little story about my time at Vectara selling retrieval augmented generation platforms. When you walk in and you show someone this, and by the way, I was doing this pre-ChatGPT, when you walk in and you show someone the magic of LLM-powered search, their eyes bug out of their head and they immediately get excited about all the possibilities of finding information that they could never discover before. And then the hangover sets in when they realize, wow, I've got to bring all the same permissions that were, embedded in my 10 years of application management in with that data if I'm going to maintain the same policy set. And the disappointment does set in a little bit, and people try to get creative and a little aggressive about how they're going to figure it out. We think there's a really big opportunity once you're inline control, providing observability, to dig in on the data access side, because we think it's one of the most interesting and rich areas for this particular problem. I hope that makes sense. You're kind of slightly nodding. That's right. So when people make a decision these days to fine tune a model, they typically do it with information that they're comfortable. Anyone who might have access to that model too could get access to that data. And that's just a fact of where it is today, but that doesn't mean it always has to be that way. But the way to handle that is some way is retrieval augmented generation, which is an alternative to fine tuning. It solves slightly different problems, but it is an alternative. And thank you for that question.
Cool. Any other questions online or in the room? Okay. Okay. This will be the last question. Then you guys will all get a chance to chat with the teams.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting. You mentioned that you omitted a lot of the companies that are may not be as relevant, that perhaps are doing general data inspection. I'm curious if you've thought of integrating with them directly rather than selling to, you could say, the end users, in this case, the companies that are owning the data. Rather
than, like, would you give me an example of one company?
Yeah, like one example would be like firewall vendors, Cisco, or for example, that are doing a data inspection, and perhaps you can integrate with them and not have to go directly to the customer. Might be a bit easier for go-to-market.
It's an outstanding idea. Like, for example, just on, I think it was Thursday, maybe Friday, Cloudflare announced a new gateway that they're trying to introduce. It's in beta still, so these very early days. Whether the right form factor is our own independent, but of course open source and free gateway, or leveraging existing gateways that are in market, that's TBD. But one thing we are clear on is we're not trying to monetize the gateway. The gateway is a facilitator for the process, but it is not the core of the monetization strategy.